This video is going to be about solving problems with kilowatt hours and amp hours. Kilowatt hours and amp hours. Let's do kilowatt hours first. Let's unpack this and see what's in there. The kilo means 1,000. Watts are actually joules per second. And then an hour is 3,600 seconds. So if we multiply all this out, you can see the seconds cancels away. And we're left with 3,600,000 joules. 3,600,000 joules. Now, joules is a unit for energy. That means that kilowatt hours is also a unit for energy. So this right here is a unit for energy. So why do we have joules and we have kilowatt hours? And this is quite a lot of joules, 3.6 million joules. One way we can think of it is if we actually look at a electricity bill. So here's an electricity bill and from PG&E, and you can see over here there's my electric charges, and you can see what they're listing in is in kilowatt hours. That's so interesting. Why not just list it in joules? Why would they actually choose to use kilowatt hours? And then you can see what they're charging me for here is about 12 cents per kilowatt hour. This is a little bit old. You can see this is from actually 2012. So this is a pretty old PG&E bill, 2011 even, of December. So that's a little more expensive now, 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Why not just charge me for joules? Why do they have to do this arbitrary thing for kilowatt hours? Well, let's see how this is going to go here. If I can go back to something. There we go. So why would you use kilowatt hours? It turns out to be a really easy unit to use if you're doing things for electricity. For example, let's say that I've got a light bulb here, and this is a 100-watt light bulb. That might be something that you could have in your house, 100-watt light bulb. It's like fairly bright for a desk lamp, but maybe for a lamp in your kitchen or something, a 100-watt light bulb. And let's say you use this light bulb for 3 hours. Let's find the energy used. All right, let's see how much energy it's going to use. Well, one way we can think about it is that 100 watts is the same thing as 100 joules per second. And then I can multiply that times 3 hours, and I can multiply that times 3,600 seconds per hour, and I can multiply all this out, and then the seconds cancel away and the hours cancel away, and anyways, this is kind of a pain, and I would get whatever all this ends up being. So it's kind of a mess. You can do that, but it's actually much easier to use kilowatt hours for your units of energy. Finding the energy used is pretty easy. If I just take 100 watts and I multiply it times 3 hours, then that gives me 300 watt hours. Divide that by 1,000, and that's actually 0.3 kilowatt hours. And then I'm done, and I can say that's how much energy I used, 0.3 kilowatt hours, right? Which is a certain amount of energy. Joules is a unit for energy. We also have calories as a unit for energy, but kilowatt hours is a nice unit to use for energy, 0.3 kilowatt hours. Let's do another example, just so you can see how easy it is. Let's say I want to figure out that I've got my computer, laptop or something. Good, and I leave it plugged in, and while it's plugged in, it uses, let's say, 40 watts. And I use that for a whole day times 24 hours, and I want to figure out how much does it cost. How much does it cost? All right, well, we can use this with kilowatt hours. It's much easier. So one piece of information you have to know is, what does PG&E charge? Let's say PG&E charges, now let's say it's, 15 cents per kilowatt hour. So to figure out how much it's going to cost, we just have to figure out how many kilowatt hours this is. It's very easy. Take 40 watts times 24 hours. All right, get the calculator out. 40 times 24. So that gives me 960 watt hours, which is 0.96 kilowatt hours. multiply that times 15 cents times 15, and oh, whoops, I forgot to divide it by 1,000. Let's clear that away. So let's start with 0.96 times 15 cents. So this equals 14.4 cents. Just like that. So that's how easy it is to use kilowatt hours. It's much easier than using joules. Okay, next thing is, let's move on and let's talk about amp hours. Amp hours. And let's break that down a little bit. So 1 amp is a coulomb per second. And then 1 hour, of course, is 3,600 seconds. So this is going to give me, the seconds are going to cancel away, and I'm going to get 3,600 coulombs. So it's actually an amount of charge. So why would you use amp hours instead of using coulombs? Well, let's do an example. Let's say you've got your phone, good, and you are using your phone for 3 hours, and you happen to know that when you're using your phone for I don't know how you'd know this, but let's say it turns out to be, oh, I don't know, 0.1 amps or something like that. If you want to figure out how many amp hours that is, it's really easy. I just take my 0.1 amps, multiply that times my 3 hours, and that would give me 0.3 amp hours. That's a unit for the amount of charge that your phone used. Now I know we use charge your phone as kind of we use this word charge, like when you charge your phone, and that's a little bit different than what I'm talking about here. This is the amount of charge, say the number of electrons or the number of protons that moved through your phone when it was working. Let's do one other example. Let's say, and usually when you talk about amp hours, usually it's when in relation to batteries. So those of you who have one of those little like portable charger things, like you plug your phone into it and it charges it up, it might actually have an amp hour rating or a milliamp hour. Maybe it's like 2,000 milliamp hours or something. Look at it. If you have one, check it out. See if it has an amp hour rating. The higher the amp hour rating, then that means it has more charge available inside of it, so you can charge more things with it. Maybe you've got like a really spiffy one that's like 7,000 milliamp hours or something like that. So check out your phone chargers. So another example we like to do is, let's say that you're using one of the cordless drills in the shop. Okay, that was pretty bad rendition of a cordless drill. However that goes. And let's say that this battery in here is rated at, I don't know, let's say 1,500 milliamp hours. And it's also 18 volts. And let's also make it have, just to make the numbers really easy, let's say that it's 36 watts. And I want to know how much time can you use the drill for. Sorry, everything's getting a little bit crooked there. This is not one of my better videos, but anyways. So I want to know how much time can you use the drill for based upon these numbers right here. So let's do a couple of calculations. First of all, with these two numbers, I can have P equals IV, and my power is 36 watts. I can find out my current, and I can have this be 18 volts. And then I conveniently pick the numbers so that my current, that's I, remember I is current, turns out to be, divide that over, 2 amps. So just take both sides divided by 18 and I get 2 amps. Great, so now I have this situation. I've got 1,500 milliamp hours. Let's actually change that into 1.5 amp hours. And that's going to equal my 2 amps times X number of hours, right? So 1.5 amp hours is 2 amps times X number of hours. Divide both sides by 2, and I get 1.5 over 2 is going to be my hours. So that's going to be 3/4 of an hour, 0.75 hours. So this is one powerful way that you can use amp hours or milliamp hours to figure out, say, how long a device is going to last. You have to know some information, right? You have to know what the battery rating is and what the different ideas are of the volts and the watts. You have to know something about the amps, right? The idea for amp hours is it's just amps times hours. That's pretty easy. Going back to the kilowatt hours thing from before, the kilowatt hours is just how many kilowatts times how many hours. That's pretty easy. Kilowatts times hours. That's it. Okay, hopefully this is helpful for you all.